Hey YouTube, this is Archangel for Truth. And I know it's been a while, but I figured this topic was a good topic to discuss as it pertains to Roe versus Wade and the right to life versus the right to kill. So let us get into it and discuss this matter and, see the issues involved with this. And regardless of where you personally are at as it pertains to uh, Roe versus Wade, whether abortion should be legal or not, that is for you to decide. I will tell you right out the bat that I believe abortion should be outlawed, and I'll explain why. And ultimately, you're free to decide otherwise, but ultimately, these are the reasons why Roe versus Wade was a wrongly decided case, and I'll explain it. So here's the problem. As I've said many times before, the Supreme Court, when it makes rulings, I would say anywhere from 90 to 95% of the time, their rulings are wrongly decided. When it comes to determining the constitutionality of a right or a law, you know, ultimately for the judiciary, their role in government is not to determine what rights are. Their role is to determine what the law is according to the Constitution, according to Marbury versus Madison, okay? If you accept what Marbury versus Madison says, then the role of the judiciary is to interpret what the law is, okay? But that is different than determining what our rights are, okay? So when Roe versus Wade was decided, they did so out of a violation of the separation of powers doctrine. Because ultimately, the role that the judiciary are supposed to have is to interpret, okay? And since there was no legislative laws that they were interpreting, their coming up with the right of on their own violated that separation of powers doctrine. Now, under the decision of Roe versus Wade, they used the Ninth Amendment to establish it as being an unenumerated right. Well, okay, here's the thing. Now, I will tell you that when it comes to the Ninth Amendment, there is no bigger advocate for Ninth Amendment unenumerated rights than myself. By far, no one can compare, to, how much I've argued as regards to Ninth Amendment unenumerated rights. But how can the right to abortion not be an unenumerated right? Here's where it gets tricky. And ultimately, those that are for abortion will say that, a woman's body, they should have a right to do with whatever they want to. And I would say constitutionally, a woman's body, that is fine, but the problem is the fetus is not the woman's body. It is not scientifically the woman's body, nor is it genetically the woman's body. And how can I prove that? Well, here's how. It is a scientific and genetic fact that the placenta and the umbilical cord are made up of stem cells, not the mother cells. And the reason why this separation has to be for the baby or the fetus to grow and to survive is because that stem cell blocks the immune system from the mother from killing the baby as a foreign object. Because the baby and the mother have different genetic codes. Part of the mother's genetic code is within the baby, but there's also part that is not. And so that is why the placenta as well as the umbilical cord that connect the mother and the baby together are stem cells and not the mother cells. And so the claim that the fetus is the mother's body is not scientifically nor genetically correct. So it boils down to now the rights of the mother versus the rights of the baby or the fetus. So the question is, do we have an unenumerated right to kill? Do we have the right to deprive others of their unenumerated rights? And that is where I disagree. I believe in unenumerated rights in as far as our unenumerated rights do not harm or take away from others their unenumerated rights, and vice versa. And so it's important to understand, the Ninth Amendment, because ultimately what the Ninth Amendment is doing is it's revealing that, our rights do not come from the government. It's pointing out that we have rights that we retained prior to the government, prior to the Constitution. In fact, the simple fact is that all your constitutional rights were at some point unenumerated rights. And so these unenumerated rights are these rights that are referred to as inalienable natural rights. So the problem exists is that the judiciary, when it made its decision, didn't have any sort of legislative interpreting for there to be able to make a determination as it pertains to the right to abort a fetus or not. And that lies the problem. There is no constitutionally protected right to commit abortion. Now, you could say, well, what about the unenumerated rights? Well, as I said, if that right is going to harm somebody, or deprive them of their unenumerated rights, then no. The answer is no. There is not an unenumerated right to cause harm to other people. Plain and simple, that's where it is. And so ultimately, the question boils down to this. Does the mother rights or the fetus rights, which takes priority here? Ultimately, because the fetus is unable to protect itself and it is in need of protection. I would say, if anything, the government is under obligation to protect the rights of the fetus. Okay? Not the rights of the mother in this instance, although both are to be protected by the government. That's the purpose of government, to protect our rights. But those rights cannot then be used to cause harm to the other. So ultimately, that's what it boils down to. There's nothing in the Constitution that would be used by SCOTUS to determine that abortion was something that was constitutionally correct. So things that they didn't have the legislature make any laws as it pertains to that, things that there was nothing in the Constitution that it could rely on. The only thing was the Ninth Amendment, and the Ninth Amendment does have unenumerated rights, but not when those unenumerated rights are there to cause harm to another. So that's what it boils down to, folks. And so, no, there is not an unenumerated right to an abortion. The Ninth Amendment does not cover that right. It's not a right. However, there are instances where we do have an unenumerated right to kill. So, for example, if someone is intent on harming you, and for the purposes of self-defense, do you have the right to kill? Yes, you do. Or, for example, for being able to survive, to consume meat, do you have the right to kill an animal, like in hunting or fishing? Yes, you do. You have that right as a means of survival. However, though we have that right as a means of survival, then the question comes is, do we have the right, as a means of non-survival, of issues that don't require us to take a life? Does that right then, from a Ninth Amendment unenumerated standpoint, kick in? And it does not. To the contrary. And so also part of the problem is, if the fetus has a right to life, they also have a right to due process. And they have a right to equal protection under the law. Okay? And so it boils down to what you believe that fetus is. If you believe that that fetus is nothing more than cellular material that belongs to the mother, then you're going to see that as a right by the mother to do with her own body. But scientifically, genetically, that is not the case. The baby has a separate genetic code. It shares part of the mother's DNA, but not the whole. And the fact that the baby must be separated in the womb by means of the placenta, by means of the umbilical cord, with stem cells protecting that baby from the immune system of the mother, is evidence that the baby, the fetus, is not the mother's body, and therefore cannot be considered as her own body to do with as she so pleases. So I'm going to leave it here. Please like and share, and we'll catch you on the next one. And take care and God bless. All righty.